The 49ers would go 13-4 last season, which is pretty surprising considering what happened at quarterback as then starter Trey Lance would go down with injury in week 2. Jimmy Garoppolo would eventually get hurt in week 13, but enter Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy, who goes 5-0 in the regular season and leads his team to the conference championship game where unfortunately he would get hurt. But now we head into 2023 firmly in the Brock Purdy era. Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know. So go ahead, become bro and subscribe. Leave this video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content as always. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let's have that nice, beautiful football discourse as we are almost done with the deep dive series. As today we have the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to go over the coaching staff, the scheme, and the roster, but stick with me until the end of the video because I'm going to give you my prediction on how I think the 49ers are going to fare in 2023. But without further ado, let's go ahead, get into the sucker with the coaching staff. Kyle Shanahan has been magnificent as a head coach. He was hired in 2017. He spent actually, he was an OC around a few different spots with the Browns, the Texans, and at Washington where he was under his father. And I think it's fair to say he might be a better play caller than his father, just the way he strings plays along one after the other, how things are just orchestrated, and he will give you similar looks and whatnot. And honestly, he has just done a fabulous job for all intents and purposes. Yes, it's the wide zone blocking scheme, but a few themes were different last year in particular as they actually ran more power, which was very interesting than they normally would. Play act really, and it was actually dependent on who was at quarterback, but when Purdy was in there, which I mean that's what we're going to see this season, the play action actually kind of slipped off a bit. They were more content with either just handing the ball off or having him just sling it. So that was actually fairly interesting. But this offense, what they do best is get the ball to their playmakers in space in a hurry and allow them to create after the catch. I think they were among the bottom teams in air yards. And honestly, you don't have to be when you have guys like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, who can just create after the catch, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. So it's I'll get to the offense a little later. But yeah, no, this offense is phenomenal. It is all the blueprint of Kyle Shanahan. He does have a couple of OCs. They're more like passing game, run game coordinators, as the run game coordinator is Chris Forster, who was actually a former OC for the Dolphins back in 2015, 2016. But he has mainly been an O-line coach throughout his whole career here with the Niners, with the Dolphins, with the Ravens, and actually in Washington under Kyle Shanahan. And then you have Clint Kubiak, who, if you didn't know, is son of Gary Kubiak, who is going to be the passing coordinator here. And it's pretty funny because his brother Clay is actually on the roster as well as an assistant QB coach, which is just really cool. And I was looking at some of the other roster spots, and they have Brian Greasy's a QB coach here. That's kind of cool. They have the running back coach and assistant head coach. You got Anthony Lynn, which should be a familiar name around the league. And then even defense, man. Darryl Tapp, former player Darryl Tapp, is an assistant D-line coach here, which I was always a big fan of Darryl Tapp because he was coming out of Virginia Tech. I lived in Virginia at the time, so I was yeah, it's the home state boy, yeah. Regardless, this offense runs through Kyle Shanahan, but he's got really good run and pass game coordinators. The defense, this is kind of the biggest question. What changes will be made on defense? Is now DeMeco Ryan is with the Houston Texans. He was the hottest name on the coaching market. He got a head coaching job with the Texans, and now we enter Steve Wilks, who the question is how much different will this offense be if you're unfamiliar with Wilks? Last season, he was the defensive pass game coordinator and secondary coach. until he became interim head coach after they fired Matt Rule there with the Panthers. Prior to that, he had like a 1-year stint as a head coach with the Cardinals, which seemed very unfair. But prior to that, and this is where I'm going to pull a lot of, okay, what did he do and what things is he going to do different than DeMeco? Is he was a former DC under Ron Rivera with the Panthers back in like 2017. So I was like looking at the numbers because that was my biggest curiosity. What is going to be different between Wilks and DeMeco? And to be fair, both ran a lot of cover 3. I kind of leaned with Wilks, leaning more on the cover 3, but like DeMeco, he would run cover 3 because he wants people to stop the run. But then they would run Tampa 2 as well, and I don't see Wilks necessarily doing that. But like for the most part, I think the biggest coverage both guys ran always ended up being cover 3 to like zone match and whatnot. But the biggest difference I could pull from is, to be fair, with Wilks, he's kind of run multi fronts, but I mean I don't think that's going to be an issue. Like if they want to lean heavy on like a even front, then I think that'll be fine. The biggest difference is the blitz rate. It is a massive difference because with DeMeco, they like to leaned more on, hey, our front 4 can go out there and win so they would scheme up a lot of stunts, loops, and whatnot. While Wilks has been a blitz heavy guy. If you go back, look at his numbers while he was DC with the Panthers, his blitz rate over that time was 9th in the NFL at 29.2. And then if you go deeper into the numbers, and I found this very interesting, his blitz rate for secondary players like defensive backs was 5th during his time at 13.9. So he wants to get after it and get after it well, whether that's a safety or even a slot coming in and getting pressure. So that is probably going to be the biggest difference in terms of how much this team is going to blitz compared to what they did under guys like DeMeco or even Robert Saleh. So I found that very interesting, and we'll kind of talk about how that will go with what they have defensively. So yeah, I guess without further ado, we're going to go ahead and talk about this offense. But first, I got to shout out today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is currently one of the most premier fantasy betting apps, and they got a best ball tournament with $15 million in cash prizes. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code Broshmo, they will match your first deposit up to $100. Remember, use promo code Broshmo when you sign up and they'll match that first deposit up to $100. Dudes, they currently got Best Ball Mania with $15 million in cash prizes available. If you feel confident, if you feel good about your fantasy football skills, then check out Underdog Fantasy. There's not a better place to play fantasy football, but as always, bet responsibly. Let's go ahead, get into it with the offensive starters. And yes, I have them as a top 10 offense because it's kind of just how they were. They're that efficient. And it all has to start with Brock Purdy, because now they have officially moved on from Trey Lance, as he was traded to the Cowboys, I think for a 4th round pick. I'm not positive. He may go down as one of the worst draft trades of all time. I mean, they basically gave 3 first-round picks to the Miami Dolphins to move up to get Trey Lance. What did the Dolphins do with those picks? I'm glad you asked, because let me tell you, because I'm a Dolphins fan. Fins up, fins up. They turned those 3 first-round picks into Bradley Chubb, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Channing Tindall. So not half bad on the Dolphins' part. Not half bad. But Trey Lance, he's now gone. Sam Darnold, firmly the backup here. Though, honestly, he looked fine in preseason. A little bit I saw from him. And Brandon Allen essentially just outplayed Trey Lance. So Brandon Allen's going to be like the 3rd quarterback here. Because, I mean, hey, last year when injuries hit at the quarterback position, like all throughout the year for the 49ers. So they're going to need that spare quarterback, maybe, potentially. But Brock Purdy was very good last year. Now, I'm not going to come out here and say he's got like amazing physical traits. He does have a bit of a noodle for an arm. But what I liked about him at Iowa State, and in particularly his first 2 years, because his last 2 years weren't nearly as good, and necessarily the talent he had there wasn't wild either, though it's not like it wasn't bad, but he took a big dip in terms of his decision making, but like in those prior 2 years, what you saw is a guy who knows how to manage the offense. He shows a little bit of savviness in the pocket. He throws with great anticipation, throwing on time, and throwing with good ball placement. But let's not pretend like he's got this big arm, amazing athletic traits. Like he can escape from pressure, but like he's not someone that's going to really threaten with what he can do with his feet. It's just that decision making and the ability to throw an accurate ball on time with anticipation. That is the allure of Brock Purdy. And I mean, looking last season, honestly, they were willing to take shots with him deep. They were, and he wasn't half bad. 44% adjusted completion percentage. Remember, that takes out throwaways, drops, and spikes. But he was really good downfield. But if you look at the intermediate and short, he was very, very good, very accurate. We're talking in around the 80% in terms of adjusted completion percentage on short to intermediate. You want to see that. You would love to see that. He was very successful on all levels of the field last season. He really, really was. And I mean, to be fair, this is a system where, yeah, it's very quarterback friendly. And if your quarterback can throw with anticipation, if he can throw with good ball placement, then he's going to succeed quite a bit. Because all you really need to do is get the ball into the hands of the playmakers and let them work. Watch me work. I don't know why I did that. Regardless, we could talk about the playmakers here real quick. I do want to take a quick gander at his the amount of play action, because they didn't use a ton of play action, but he was exceptionally good when they did. So maybe that's something they want to incorporate. We kind of know Kyle Shanahan to be a guy that doesn't mind dipping into play action. But he just didn't do it a lot with Purdy under center, which I just found very fascinating. Purdy's going to be throwing a hella good weapons. Deebo Samuel, one of the best make you miss guys in all of football last season. He had 36 forced missed tackles. He's basically like a running back playing receiver out there, and sometimes they will line him up as a running back. He is just phenomenal in that regard. And Brandon Ayuk, he ain't no slouch either. Like, Brandon Ayuk is really, really good. He actually broke over 1,100 yards if you include the playoffs last season. Did I say over 1,100? Want to make sure I didn't just say 100. But he had 16 forced missed tackles. He did have more yards because Debo was hurt a few games, but Ayuk is a really, really good receiver, really good speed, a guy that has really become a very good route runner as well. And just now you got two really great weapons there for Brock Purdy. You got Juwan Jennings, who was someone I actually really liked coming out of Tennessee. I thought his ability to create after the catch was really good. I had him as like this third rounder. He ends up going in like the seventh, right? Yeah, the seventh round. And I was like, oh, wow, man. I guess the NFL just hated him. And he has been a really good slot player for them. He really has. So just kind of an icing on the cake here. You got George Kittle. There's a weapon as well. On his 70 receptions, I think he had like 11 forced missed tackles. You have Christian McCaffrey coming to CMC, coming out of the backfield, just being a nuisance. He had 800 yards receiving, to be fair. 500 of that came with the Niners, if you remember, prior to the trade. He was with the Panthers. A trade which, to be fair, I kind of criticized. Because I remember saying, I don't know yes, they're a better team now, but I don't know how much this will help them get over the hump. And I will flat out say I'm kind of wrong. I was wrong about that. But I mean, I feel like I could say I was wrong about that, but there's more context that goes into that because, yes, once they got CMC, this run game was infinitely better. And what he provides as a pass catch option is great as well. But they make that trade because Elijah Mitchell was banged up. What they had going on, like Jeff Wilson was fine, but he was kind of more of this like home run shot. That's why eventually he ends up getting traded to the Dolphins. And the other guys they had back there, like Tyron David Price, Jordan Mason, they just weren't getting the job done. To be fair, they were two rookies. They weren't able to get the job done. So yeah, they go out, they make a move for CMC, and yes, it infinitely helps them kind of get over the curb. The run game starts to become scary. But Elijah Mitchell being banged up, I felt like played such a big part in that because once he came back, like he was still pretty darn good for the squad. Like I want to go and look because to be fair, he comes back when CMC is already kind of like the lead rusher here. So Elijah Mitchell, he ends up with little over 300 yards rushing, but I mean, he was so good on 68 attempts, 10 forced missed tackles. He was averaging close to 5 yards per carry. So, I mean, if anything, it's an incredibly scary two-headed attack with both CMC and Elijah Mitchell. So it's like I could say flat out, okay, I'm wrong about that take. Because I thought the compensation was a bit high, but I get it. You're getting one of the best running backs in the league, and it was very pivotal. But like Elijah, I feel like Elijah Mitchell, with that context, like he played such a big part in him not being healthy. Played a big part in going out and having to make a move for CMC. So I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to scapegoat it. I was wrong. But I do want to kind of like mention that because I mean, it kind of leads me into the point of like, hey, Elijah Mitchell, this dude ain't no joke. He's really good. Just saying. So like, yeah, they got weapons galore here on the offense. Even Kyle Juszczyk is a scary weapon coming out of the backfield as an H-back, fullback type. Let's go ahead and talk about the depth here on the roster. As Danny Gray, if you remember, they grabbed him in the 3rd round. He feels more like he's going to be this vertical threat for the roster because like Brandon Ayuk, he offers that as well. He can be a guy that goes vertical, but Juwan Jennings and Deebo Samuel are more guys that are going to make a living underneath. So Danny Gray is that vertical guy. They do have Ray McCloud. I think he's a little banged up though. I just put away my injury report thing. I do think he's a little banged up, so like I don't want to go too much into it, but he's kind of there for a special teams reason. Chris Conley's on the roster here. Interesting. I don't know. This will be interesting. Who makes who ends up being the wide receiver 6, assuming Ray can be healthy, because Ronnie Bell, they drafted him at the back end of the 7th round. He gives you return experience, so if they do want a returner with McLeod potentially out, like Bell is that guy, another guy who actually could tear you apart at all parts of the field, I think. Doesn't do much to create after the catch, but good player. Willie Snead's still in the NFL. That I didn't realize that until seeing this. Anthony Miller's still in the NFL too. That's a guy that I thought was going to be really good and just ends up being just I mean, is there a nice way to say it? Just kind of being lazy. Tay Martin, I feel like he's a long shot. If anything, Ronnie Bell's that guy. Looking at the tight ends, Charlie Warner, more of a blocking type. Cameron Latu, I thought was a bit of a reach. I wasn't nearly as high on him. I think I had him more as like this midday 3, 5th round guy. But he has good receiving ability when he is not dropping the football. Like, the ball skills aren't the most natural. He is a former linebacker. And as a blocker, he's got that dog in him, but he's not necessarily a like great blocker. Ross Dooley, I'm surprised is this far on the depth chart, but like, because he's kind of been the number 2 for the most part. But it kind of is what it is. They do have Braden Willis, which I kind of got to bring up Jack Coletto as well, as those are 2 guys that I think could be the next Kyle Juszczyk. Both kind of played the tight end position, but well, they did play the tight end position. They would also play like big slot, but sometimes they would also take snaps in the backfield. So it doesn't surprise me that Braden Willis gets picked up as a UDFA. Jack Coletto gets picked up as a UDFA because they are ideal scheme fits here to be like heir apparents to Kyle Juszczyk if they want to start nurturing those guys. I kind of went into the run game a little bit there with Elijah Mitchell is just a phenomenal guy. He's got some good burners coming out of Louisiana. I was shocked that he made it to the 6th. He ends up being the better back there, because if you remember, they took Trey Sermon in the 3rd round, I believe. He ends up beating him out. Jordan Mason, Tyron Davis Price, I feel like those are kind of like their bigger body bruisers, if you will. They do bring in Jeremy Nichols, who's Mick Nichols, who's kind of a lighter back and can get it done. Hey, yo, Brian Hill. Is this the Brian Hill? This is. I didn't know he was still in the league. I wonder if he makes the roster. I think it's kind of a long shot. I feel like the 4 backs here are Davis Price, are Mason, Mitchell, McCaffrey. I don't know. We'll see. But a big dictator on how these running backs are going to produce will be the offensive line. And hey, let's just go ahead with the whole bad takes exposed on my part. I thought they reached on Aaron Banks. I had him more as I think I had him as a 4th rounder, or maybe even a guy that could sneak into the 3rd round. They take him in the 2nd. I was like, that's a little rich for me. And I'm not saying like the dude's been lights out, but like super big body coming in at 325, and like honestly, kind of they grab him, I guess, with the anticipation was like, hey, we run a little bit more power to kind of keep teams honest on the defense, because I mean, when you're running so much outside zone, typically you use counter to kind of throw them off, or at least keep them honest, but they also incorporate some power. And I guess with a guy like Aaron Banks, who's got that girth to him, it's no surprise. I'm not saying the dude was lights out last year. He wasn't. But you could see in his first year as a starter, he was more along than I expected, and I expect another jump from him this year. They also took Spencer Burford out of UTSA, who I thought was going to be more of a tackle just because of his long build. But I understood, hey, you could probably move this guy into guard and be all right, but he is a bit undersized, but he uses that length just to tear guys down, dude. Really, man. So like they paired up, and to be fair, I'm not saying these guys were excellent last season. I'm just saying in terms of them being first year starters, I walked away like, oh wow, these guys could develop into like very nice duo there at tackle. And like, hey, let's just keep going with like my bad takes. Like Jake Brendel, I wasn't a big fan of. I really wasn't. I was like, okay, the dude's like 6'4" and he can't get over 300 pounds. But like the dude, I admit, like I was like, okay, but he's flexible. He's a guy that can get down and get that leverage and sink in. And he was just way like, I knew he was going to be an all right pass protector. My concern was how will he hold up in the run game? And to be fair, last year was much better than I expected. I think he's another guy trended in the right direction. So this is literally just Broshmo's bad takes exposed, I suppose. Really feels that way. It's not even like, especially with Banks, it's not even like I was low on Banks. I just felt like I felt like he could be a good player. It was just he was taken earlier than he should have. I don't know. At this point, it's like, okay, maybe the second round was the right spot, depending on how he develops. And I don't know, he's just trending in the right direction. Jake Brendel, another guy, because I remember saying, oh, Donovan West, who was a UDFA, who now is just kind of a practice squad guy around the league at this point. I was like, there's a good chance he could maybe usurp him. But like Brendel took that next step, dude. He looked good. He looked the part. So like all in all, man, that interior of the offensive line, these are young guys that are trending in the right direction. You got Trent Williams. He is the best tackle in football. Dude is big and he could, whatever you need him to do, he can do it. You want him to kill the guy in front of him, go ahead. Let's just go ahead and charge him with murder. You want him to come pull around, then that big boy is moving, and that's a scary thing. So yeah, Trent Williams, he's just fabulous. Still continues to be one of the best tackles, if not the best tackle in football. All right, and then Colton McKivitz. I'm willing to give benefit of the doubt here with the offensive line. McKivitz has been a guy they have been developing, and I kind of liked him coming out of West Virginia. So he is someone they have been developing the past few years. I want to get an actual snap total on him because he didn't play hardly at all last season. Yeah, the most he played was his rookie season at right guard. They moved him back to tackle in 2021. And he's only seen 140 snaps since his rookie season where he had 300. So, and this is a contract year for him. So now they're like, hey, get out there and show us what you're worth, man. Show us that we have been developing you and we've been doing it correctly. So like, I'm kind of intrigued. I'm not willing to bet against him. I think there is, let's just go ahead, jump to the depth, because I think there is a case to be made here that Jalen Moore, someone who, another fifth rounder, but they drafted a year later than McKivitz, who could, I think, potentially, if things don't go well with McKivitz, that Moore could be the next guy up and could be like the eventual, like could be a future starter for this squad. Keep in mind, this was Mike McGlinchey's spot last year. I actually really liked Jalen Moore coming out of Western Michigan. I did think he was a project, but now I'm curious, do things come to fruition for that? So like, yes, you got worse at the right tackle spot, but there is reason to be hopeful that it's not going to be as big of a loss as you may have thought. Looking at the depth on this roster, you have Nick, I'm not going to say his last name. I think this is the cat out of Fordham a couple of years ago. Yeah, Fordham. He's a project. He's a developmental guy. Keith Ishmael, just a big-bodied San Diego State center. We haven't seen much of him yet, so it's kind of like we'll see if injury does happen to Brendel. John Feliciano, that's a good depth player to have. Like, it wasn't too long ago where he was a solid enough starter. Like, yeah, like in most recent years, like it's kind of been like, he's not as good as he once was, but still it's not a bad depth guy to have. Matt Pryor, you kind of hope he doesn't start. Again, I'd have Jalen Moore as the next guy up. If we want to go deeper on the roster here, they have Joey Fisher coming out of Shepherd, who right now, developmental guy. You could say the same thing about Jason Poe. I believe he was Mercer. Yeah, Mercer, he's a developmental guy, but those are two very good athletes. Very good athletes that they could take time developing and they could end up as future starters. So, I should talk about Manning here, who's a developmental tackle out of Hawaii, who I really like. I was just like, he's not ready for the NFL game just because he didn't really play in an offense that was very translatable. But man, you throw him on the practice squad for a couple of years, then hey man, you might have something there. You really might have something there. So offensive line, all in all, like I know losing McGlinchey's kind of big, but I think they're just trending in the right direction. Should be business as usual. While there might be some, you might say, many unknowns on the offensive line, it's guys that they have been developing and working with, and you want to feel positive about that, especially given that they haven't seen a ton of NFL snaps. You look at guys like Burford, Banks, Brendel, they're all trending in the right direction, and then you have the best tackle in football. So yeah, this offense is just chef's kiss. You gotta love it. Let's go ahead. Let's get to the defense. I said the offense is top 5. The defense, I said the offense is top 10. The defense is top 5 for me. Just phenomenal. We're gonna look at all the depth that they have on this squad and reasons to be encouraged moving forward. Let's go ahead, start with the biggest strength of this football team being the defensive line. They lost significant guys this past offseason. Charles Omenihu goes on, gets a good contract from the Chiefs. Samson Ibuka, he ends up going to get a good contract with the Colts. There we go. Right? Colts. Yeah, because then Arden Key goes to the Titans. The Titans. Not to say Arden Key was on the roster last season, but he was a guy that was previously sniped. So, regardless, like those were two guys like that put up significant pressure. We're talking about like over 100 pressures and 13 sacks last season. You're having to replace. But Drake Jackson was the guy that they drafted out of the second round in 2022, and they were hoping is kind of the guy to step up here and be that player that just gets consistent pressure. So now he steps up, and I mean last season he was fine. Like 16 pressures, 4 sacks, more of a rotation role. So we're going to see more from him. So it's going to be interesting. I didn't mention Nick Bosa, but Nick Bosa, dude's amazing. Currently, he is he banged up right now? I don't know. I still expect maybe him to start the year, but the guy's phenomenal. He's probably he is in the discussion of best edge rushers in the NFL right now. 98 pressures, 19 sacks, if you include the postseason last year. The dude is just phenomenal. Inside of him is Eric Armstead, who has also been very good. Unfortunately, he was a little banged up last season, but 30 pressures, 2 sacks. Very good. They wanted to get better at the 3-tech position there. So they go out and get Javon Hargrave, who was just an utter monster last season. So yeah, this defensive line, just from a starter perspective, you look at like, Drake Jackson's probably the weak spot there, but a guy who had a lot of upside coming out of USC. You just kind of wanted to see more consistent play from him. He was kind of like a hot, cold type of player, but someone who had the trait. So he's now stepping up this year. It's going to be very, very fascinating. Let's talk about the depth they have there on the interior. They drafted Robert Beal Jr. in the 5th. He's going to be he's a rotation player at this point. I don't expect to see much from him, but he's stupid explosive, really good length, tad undersized, which maybe does this team. Maybe they do go multiple fronts. But if we're talking about the edge position, the next two guys up, Cleveland Farrell, who at this point is a solid depth player. Yeah, he's a bust. Raiders should have never drafted him. pick 4 overall. I think that's what it was. But he's a solid depth player. He's been producing well last couple of years. Kerry Hyder, just a very good journeyman at this point of his career, can step up and be very solid for this squad when he is in the ball game. He had over 400 snaps. You love to see it. He could kick inside. He could stay outside. Is what it is. Looking more at the depth there. Couldn't tell you much about Alex Barrett off the top of my head. San Diego State. Okay. So I don't even think we saw much, if anything, from him last season. Austin Bryant, another good depth guy that is capable of kicking inside. Hey, my boy Marlon Davidson's on the squad. Yo, I loved Marlon Davidson. I mean, he ends up being like kind of a bust for a day 2 pick, but it probably doesn't make the roster. Javon Kinlaw, wow, I feel like the 49ers are just bad takes exposed for me. And this is like the opposite of a guy that I was very high on the upside of, to where, and it just hasn't panned out. It just hasn't for Javon Kinlaw. He just hasn't been good for this roster. I mean, so much so, like, they don't like putting him on the field. He didn't play a ton. Like, I think he was hurt a little bit last year as well. And now we're here in a contract year, and it's like, okay, what do you got in him? And they don't feel good about what they have. Kevin Givens, he's a very solid rotation player for this squad. I would say probably more of a pass rusher, a guy you want on rushing or pass rushing downs. So passing downs, I suppose. But he's been very solid for them. He can get after it. They have T.Y. McGill. Ooh, wasn't he Wagner? Could be wrong about that. No, North Carolina State. My bad. But yeah, I don't really expect to see much of him. But I mean, he did have 200 snaps last season. Wasn't that effective, but he was on the field. Marlon Davidson, dude, is someone out of Auburn who I really liked, who I thought was he was kind of used as an edge at Auburn. Started putting on weight. He got up to 290 prior to the Senior Bowl. Had a banger day 1 of practice. Didn't work out he basically opted out the rest of the week, and just it didn't amount to anything in Atlanta. It just didn't pan out. So I don't know. Maybe he could sneak in and make this roster. Kind of a long shot, but maybe. But no, they got guys like for how elite their starters are. They got some guys there on the defensive line to shift in and out. The best linebacker duo in the NFL: Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. Why do people sleep on Dre Greenlaw? This dude is phenomenal. He is he's so stinking good, man. And it's his best football is just ahead of him. This is just a sick combination. Guys that are savvy in coverage, but they have the athleticism to drop deep if you need them to get to a spot. But they're smart enough players to where they're actually covering players and not just grass when they do drop back into zone. Just phenomenal. Fred Warner to me is the best linebacker in all of football. These guys are sure tacklers. They'll make plays in the run game. I absolutely love them. Let's talk about the depth there at linebacker real quick, because there's a couple of interesting names. Marceliano McCary Ball was a former safety, box safety at Indiana. I'm curious, what do they have as his size right now? It's kind of like he's at 214. Oh, that's real light. Real light. So I guess he's playing only on like third and long. So he's kind of like a dime linebacker at this point. But yeah, the dude is a vicious hitter. He played kind of a box safety role at Indiana. They did draft D. Winters, who he's undersized, but he's a guy that can get after it. He's a guy that found himself in the right spot at the right time in college football. Like if you remember in the college football playoff against Michigan, where he had the interception, I think it was pick 6 too, wasn't it? Jalen Graham, very good athlete there at Purdue. I think both those guys actually make the roster. Here, let me let Gojo in. What's up, Gojo? You want to just talk about how the Chiefs are better than the Niners? Because I know you're a big Chiefs fan. Gojo, the resident Chiefs fan here. You good, buddy? Cool, I'm going to keep talking then. All right, so what else do we got cooking here? At linebacker, I really couldn't tell you much about these other two guys. Oren Burks, he's fine. He's a good depth guy. He's got a lot of experience under his belt. But like, again, the starters are so amazing. There will be questions in the secondary, I think. Perhaps because they do lose Jimmy Ward. That's kind of huge. They lose Emmanuel Mosley. So now we're looking at, in terms of like the starters that are replacing those guys, it's Diamador Lenoir, it's Isaiah Oliver, because if you remember, Jimmy Ward was a guy who would play deep, but he also split a lot of time in the slot last season. Actually, majority of the time he was in the slot last year. But yeah, that's now going to be Isaiah Oliver. And people also, okay, listen, Isaiah Oliver is kind of developed into a solid slot corner. So he made the transition from like a full-time boundary corner where he was just kind of struggling to a full-time slot in 2020. And while he wasn't necessarily, because of injuries and such, wasn't on the field consistently the last 2 years, he has like about 500 snaps over that time where he was very solid. Like he was really good for Atlanta down the stretch last season. So he now steps in to be the slot. And I don't think that's bad. Yeah. Did you downgrade? Yeah, essentially it's Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward is a freaking monster. But Oliver has been pretty darn solid. I mean, just on 350 snaps last year, he had 5 pass breakups and an interception. Diamador Lenoir does. Let's not act like he's like this dude's stepping up into like a role. Emmanuel Mosley got hurt last season, and Diamador already stepped up and looked pretty darn good. Really did. I was always concerned because I didn't think like Lenoir wasn't the best athlete coming out of Oregon, but golly, I loved this guy's tape. I loved it so much. He ends up going in the 5th, and I love that he has just worked out. He's kind of become this star. Don't you scratch my rug. Don't you scratch my rug. Swear, man. Gojo trying to make his presence known in the video. But yeah, no, Lenoir was very good last season. So was Charvarius Ward. He was kind of the big free agent pickup a year prior from Kansas City. And he has been wonderful. I remember like thinking, I was like, man, is this team going to be playing a lot more man coverage? And to be fair, they did. It wasn't nearly as high as I anticipated, but they did start playing more man coverage again under D'Amico. There was more of these like zone match concepts. So yeah, they're looking good at corner. And we could go to the secondary. Talanoa Hufanga. Another bad takes exposed. I guess that's just the Niners telling me, hey, you're wrong. Even when we take a guy you like, I know, I'm crying, Gojo. I'm crying about it. But even when you take a guy that you like in Javon Kinlaw, he's gonna be a bust. You're wrong. The Niners making me wrong on all angles. All right, later, buddy. I'll catch you on the flip side. Buddy? There you go. Oh, yeah, just bad takes exposed. Hufanga, I thought was going to be... I thought he could be a good box safety. I didn't really think he had like the range to play deep. And to be fair, man, it's not like his range still isn't great, but like he has definitely become a lot more of a just well put together player, a guy that won't like has a good feel of where the assignments are around him, so he won't get out of position, and he has a nose for the football too, man. 7 pass breakups, 4 interceptions last season. So like Hufanga, I'm willing to say it should have probably gone a lot higher. I I wasn't in love with him as an athlete, and that's something I've kind of grown as. I'm gonna just go ahead and talk about this real quick. It's just like how you grow in terms of being when you evaluate talent for the draft. Because I have always been a sucker for athleticism at all positions. And especially actually when it comes to like offensive interior, it's been something I've had to like reel back on. It's like, okay, you don't need to be the best athlete to be a good player on the interior. You need to reel back on that. And it's like something I've even told myself with like linebackers and safeties and corners. Listen, you don't have to be like the most fluid or the fastest or quickest athlete to get things done. Like how are these guys in terms of their technique or their overall awareness on the field of where they need to be, where they should be. And it's just, that's something I've grown at over the last couple of years. So Hufanga, I proudly say you're a guy that I missed on that taught me a lot. Thank you. But yeah, the dude's been good. Speaking of good, man, Tashawn Gibson having a late career resurgence. He was freaking phenomenal last season. He led the 49ers in snaps. He was phenomenal against the run, only 2 missed tackles. Had 5 interceptions and 3 pass breakups last season. How old are you right now? Like 31? You're 33? Ain't no way! Oh my gosh. Dang, dude. I think it that kind of speaks volumes of why that they went after a guy like Jair Brown, who, if we get to the depth, we can move to depth here. We're talking about the secondary in general. They went after Jair Brown in the 3rd, getting a guy who was not the rangiest guy. Did feel like a bit like a Kirkland brand Javon. Oh my gosh, well, what's Brisker's first name? It's Javon, right? Hold on. Bears. Jaquan, not Javon. Ha. Jaquan Brisker. He kind of felt like a value brand version of that. But he was a dude that, man, there's legit ball skills. He comes down with a head full of steam, wants to give that hit, which sometimes he could be really aggressive. But you could see why a lot of people liked him. Definitely see why a lot of people liked him. And he kind of looks like he's the heir apparent here because Gibson, I mean, at 33, it's got to hit sometime, right? The play's got to go downhill at some point, which, I mean, to be fair, it did in Chicago. All right, we got George Udom, who is more of a special teamer here. In terms of next one in after the starters for the corner position, we got Samuel Womack, who didn't see a ton of time last season, just had like a little over 150 snaps, but had a pass breakup and an interception. He's actually been, at least what we've seen, the little bit we've seen, it's encouraging. I probably think Aubrey Thomas, who's just kind of been with the squad longer, is probably corner 4 in terms of your perimeter, your boundary guys. Though Daryl Luter could make a case. He's currently on the PUP, but someone that they drafted that I really liked out of South Alabama. So he's a guy that just kind of fits their system, fits their scheme. Those are probably the 5 guys. Maybe you get Deshaun Jameson in here, who was coming out of Texas. He played corner, played slot, he played defensive, like safety for him. He played all over this place. Probably comes in as a special teamer if he does make the roster. I don't know, man. I think with his flexibility, maybe he can. In the slot, they have AJ Parker there. That's is what it is. Quantrez Knight, who was coming out of UCLA last season, who's a really good athlete. Just the play was all over the place with him. It really, really was. And he played kind of everywhere in that secondary for the Bruins. So, I don't know. I feel like if you're going to... I feel like it's between Knight and Jameson. If you want to have that versatility in your secondary, someone who could play corner, who could play safety. Though, I mean, at this point, AJ Parker is kind of a little bit more proven. But, like, all in all, man, like, this secondary looks nuts. We're talking about a really good safety tandem here with the potential of Brown there. Probably sits this season most of the time. Lawal looked good last season. Ward was great. Oliver has looked good. And then you have like the promise of Womack, the promise of Luter, excuse me. So like all in all, yeah, this defense is just absolutely phenomenal. It really is. They're top 5. Now let's go ahead, get to what you came here for. That's right. We're going to go over my predictions for the San Francisco 49ers as I have them going a nice 13-4. That's right. You might be like, oh, well, I mean, Brock Purdy, I mean, you know, what if he regresses? What if he doesn't look nearly as good? Well, they're also aided by that they have the 4th easiest schedule in the NFL, according to my projections. So it's like, yeah, that kind of helps out. As you can see, I have them 8-0 against losing teams, 4-3 against playoff teams, 5-4 against winning teams. So that's kind of a fair breakdown. If, to be fair, like most of their games are, or at least a good portion of their games are going to be against losing teams. I do have them split in the division with the Seahawks, but I have them beating Arizona and the Rams twice. That's just me being honest. So I have them going 5-1 in the division. Their current over and under is 10.5. I'm probably taking the over again, just considering how weak their schedule appears to me. Let's go ahead with the game by game. They start with the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Could very well be a loss there. So could be. But I mean, I could see them, they're beating the Rams. Like I said, they're going to run through this division outside of the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks could probably, I think they could potentially get a game. Though, to be fair, the Niners have had their number. They get the Giants at home. They get the Cowboys at home. Those are kind of big games there. I do have them losing to the Browns. This is the Browns coming off a bye. So I feel like that's a fair loss maybe to give them since we're projecting this. Going into their bye, I have them losing to the Bengals. I know this one's at home for the Niners, but the Bengals are also coming off of their bye. I have them beating the Jaguars. Both teams come off their bye, though, so that'll be interesting. This one is in Jacksonville, but the Niners are just a really good squad. Unfortunately, you have to travel back to Philadelphia for your revenge game. But I can see them winning that one. I really, really can. Like I said, I have them splitting with the Seahawks as they'll face the Seahawks twice in a 3-week period. And then they end the season actually not too bad. Like you get the Cardinals here. That I know it might be with Kyler Murray, but that team doesn't have a lot of good players. It's just kind of what it is. They're kind of in a rebuild. The Baltimore Ravens is going to be easily the toughest task here. But then you finish the year with Washington, which they're going to be they're a gritty team. You don't want to just sleep on them. But I mean, you end the year with probably the Rams, who are going to be like banged up to like kingdom come. So like you end the year with 3 of your last 4 games being the Cardinals, Commanders, Rams. So it's kind of ideal in that regard. So I think them going 13-4 is fair. You probably now know that like again, if you're not new to the channel, you know I don't do this based on power rankings. I do the order of this deep dive series based on a draft order, which means I have the 49ers once again losing in the conference championship game. Though I think it could definitely go their way, but there's just a there's the team that I feel a bit higher on. And we'll get to them when we get to them. But we only got 3 more teams left here in this deep dive series. Might as well reveal them here. It's the Bengals, it's the Eagles, and it's the Chiefs. And I feel like a lot of people would say those are like the top 3 teams in football right now. Though you can make an argument for the teams we've just kind of gone over here in the Niners, in the Bills. I think they're all kind of in that club. I honestly think those are the 5 best teams in football. I really, really do. And it sucks to say as a Dolphins fan. But that's it for the video. Go ahead, do the YouTube thing. And as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.